So, where did the story for Betweos actually come from? Well, back when I was still a young man and living with my parents, my brother and I uh, had different rooms, and I was sitting in my room one day and probably reading a novel, probably sci-fi. And my brother Byron comes in and he says, "Hey, I got this idea for a really interesting story. I want to, see what you think of it." I was like, "Pff, okay, I like to read. I like stories. I did a little bit of writing in high school, but I wasn't, you know, didn't consider myself a writer at that time. And I had never wrote a novel or anything like that. Um, and he told me the story, and it was pretty bare bones, and it was, not quite what it is now, but it was the same, had the same bones. And I said that's a that's an interesting take, and we kind of talked about it for a long time, and we thought it would be really cool if it was a movie, actually two movies, because it was a war story, but it was told from you know both side or opposite sides of the war. So a kid from one side and his story, and a kid from the other side and their story, and how they meet in the middle of this war. And hadn't really been done too much before that I could tell. And because it was sci-fi and had sci-fi elements and all this, I was like, pretty sure this is unique even to sci-fi. So, but we thought, oh yeah, it'd be cool if it was two movies and you released one on the East Coast and one on the right on the West Coast, and the audience on one coast would only be for the one character, and the guy everybody on the other coast would be for the other character, and then you'd just swap them after 6 months, and you'd have to go see the same movie from another point of view. And I was like, nah, that would never work. There's no way you could get people to buy two books or two stories, two movies. And I said it should probably be a novel, and he's like, yeah, okay, write it. And I was like, I'm not a novelist, I've never written anything. And he said, well, let's just keep talking about it then until it happens someday or we find somebody to write it. And I'm like, okay. So we talked about it off and on for years and years after that. I went to school and eventually went to a film school, and had some classes in screenwriting, and feel like I understood the structure of movies. I was like, I should write the Betweos movie. So I wrote it as a screenplay, and I let some friends read it, and they're like, something's missing. We can't really put a finger on it, but it's too much bang bang, shoot 'em up, blowing up things, and not about anything. And I was like, yeah, it really needs some more depth, more layers, if you will. And so I kind of threw it on the shelf and actually turned to novel writing not long after that, and started writing books. And but always in the back of my mind was the story of Betweos that my brother had told me, and we kept talking about it over the years. Whenever we got together, either on a phone call or a Zoom call or in person, we'd always talk about Betweos. And to him and I, it was already done. We'd just talk about it. And um, and I kind of thought of it when I first started writing books. It's like, maybe someday I'll write Betweos and I'll have enough knowledge, because when you first start writing books, you don't know anything about what you're doing, and you go to all these classes, and you all these you know talk to all these people and read all these books on writing, and write over and over and over. And sometimes you get better and over time, and I eventually did. But and it wasn't many years before I finally felt like, all right, you know what, I should tell a story before I die. So let me have a hack at it. So I wrote it, or I started to write it, and then I realized that I don't know the structure of this. It's very complicated. And the thing that got me thinking about the structure of this book was a web article on the ring theory for the Star Wars prequels and original book movies. And I was just fascinated how it appeared that George Lucas had used this ring theory to go full circle on his six movie uh, series. How movies 1 through 3 were mirrored movies 4, 5, and 6 in that series. And it's a fascinating article, and it got me really thinking about structure. And that let me come up with a plot, interesting plot for the story. Uh, you know, I don't want to give away too many details unless you've read it. You don't really know. I don't want to spoil it, but the ring theory was central to me figuring out the plot. And I eventually wrote it as a full novel a couple years ago now. And once again, I started reading it. When you're done, you let it sit for a while, and then you pull it out of the drawer and you read it again. And I was like, yeah, it's not grabbing me. Not even from the first page does it grab me. And I knew as a writer, you got to grab the reader right away. And I was like, it's kind of boring. What's wrong? You're always constantly critiquing yourself. What can I do different? And it turns out it wasn't structure so much as it was point of view. I felt that what it needed a very specific first person point of view. You had to get into the character of the main character, and you had to really intimately know this person. And because it had two main characters, you needed to do it twice, and each one had to be different enough from the other that when you switch chapters to the other point of view, that the reader didn't get lost and say, oh, wait, who are we now? They had to be different. And I knew they were different, but I was like, okay, their voices need to be different. So I rewrote the entire novel in first person, and after that I knew it was done. It was ready. So what you're reading now is the result of probably 30 plus years of, hey, here's a story idea, to here's a completed novel. It's been a heck of a journey, but I'm glad it's finally out there and that you guys can enjoy it.